Hello, everyone. So again, I would like to welcome you to our program this morning. And I really wish that it could be in person because that would be so fun to have all of you guys here at City Arts. If you haven't visited City Arts before, then I want to let you know that it is a 3-story building that has classrooms on each floor as well as art galleries. We have a huge range of art classes that we offer, and we also have an art shop on the first floor. And you guys are welcome to come in anytime. We're open 7 days a week, and it's free to come in and look around. And I just want to welcome you guys as your local community art center. So what we're going to do this morning is we're going to create our own loom. And I want to remind you guys that if you have questions as we're going along, if you could just type them in the chat. So again, that's down there at the bottom of your screen. If you could type them in the chat there, and then I'll answer them as we go along. And then again, at the end, then we can have a more verbal chat if you guys need some more help. So I would like to share with you my screen for a little PowerPoint presentation. And this is just to give you guys a little background of weaving. So weaving is the craft of lacing fibers together to make fabric or cloth. And you use a loom to hold the thread taut, and it can be done by a machine or it can be done by hand. I have a very basic knowledge of weaving, but I use weaving in my everyday life because all of my clothing is made from weaving. All of your sheets and your bedding is weaving. Your quilt on your bed is woven fibers and fabrics, probably the coat that you wore. And it's not always just yarn that's made out of cotton. It can also be from plastic fibers, all different kinds of things. Spinning and weaving in ancient Greece were very important tasks for women in their everyday life because they were expected to perform these duties. Weaving is a very functional art form, meaning it's something that you can use in your everyday life, like I said, with our coats and with our clothes and our bedding, but also it can be very beautiful and artful and just something to look at and admire. The depiction of goddesses and heroic mythological mortal women as weavers and spinners indicate how important it must have been because it was in all of the religious texts and practices and books that we're reading, such as Circe. And so we can tell this was a huge part of women's everyday lives. And I would like to give you guys 3 key words to remember as we're going through our workshop this morning. We are going to be creating a loom. We're going to put together that frame, which our weaving is going to be made on. So you guys all should have your cardboard looms. And warp is the word for the threads that go up and down vertically. And that word you probably haven't heard before. And so I want to put that in your mind that we're going to be creating our warp. And when we weave and go horizontally back and forth, that's called the weft. So warp and weft are probably new words to you, maybe even loom. But with these 3 basic guidelines, we can create a weaving. There's lots of different ways to weave. These are some simple techniques. We have plain, twill, and satin. And as you can see in the diagram there, you can see the different patterns that can be formed with different colors. We're going to be doing a plain weaving, which is an over, under technique. And what we're going to do is just this basic back and forth weaving, but if you start getting really creative with it, these cardboard looms that you have, they can be used over and over. And once you become more confident, you can start adding in other colors. And you could also add in different types of fabrics or fibers. It doesn't have to just be yarn, or it could be different thicknesses of yarn. You could put in big pieces of fabric. I've also seen some artists start putting in natural elements like grasses, and you can do all different types of things. So I wanted to give you some ideas of different things that you can do weaving, and we'll get started. The process is pretty simple, but after a while you'll get the hang of it and you'll get better at it. So let's see, I stopped sharing my screen. So now, can everybody see my face and then also the loom over here? Just give me a wave. Okay. So take your cardboard loom, and I put these stickers on the back here. So this could be the front, but if you want to weave over the top of the sticker, you can do that as well. But the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to kind of break up these perforated marks. And this will give us a little bit more give when we're putting our thread through our loom. So if you can do that with me, because these were nice and tight from cutting on a machine. What we do at City Arts when we have field trips with our young students is we usually make this loom out of cardboard ourselves. And so you can make a loom out of anything really. We do cardboard, and then we create bigger spaces between here. So we usually do 5 slits across here. And then what we're going to create is something that maybe could be like a cup holder or a coaster or something kind of that size. Sometimes I have students who like to do something really thin and then they create a bracelet. But after you get the hang of it, then you'll start getting more creative with it and decide what you want to do differently. Okay.
Alicia, give us just a second. We've got a couple people who cannot not see your loom, and I want to troubleshoot this. So
yeah,
just know that we're doing that in the background.
Can't see the loom. Okay. And maybe if you're still not there, if you can't see it, I'll put it up here where you can see my face. And I'm kind of just crinkling and just pressing apart. We're just trying to make these a little bit looser. We're not really bending them because we want them to stay on there, but it'll make it easier when we go to put our thread across. Oh, I see. Maybe the people who can't see the speaker view, are you on a phone? And if that's helpful, maybe I do some here for the overhead, and then I can also bring it up here. And let
good. Darby says if you're on a phone, swipe right. I'm a little bit less familiar with the features on a phone. My other suggestion would be to find the City Arts Loom screen and specify that you want that one spot lit. We've tried to do it for everyone, but it may not show up correctly on a device.
Okay.
Well, and the phone screens are going to be smaller, so they're probably trying to maximize what you can see so that you can get a good experience.
I'm wondering if they can see just one at a time on the phone.
But try swiping to see if it gives you the other screen. And Alicia, you can go ahead and continue, and I will keep troubleshooting in the chat.
And again, I see like maybe not everyone is on yet as well. We might have people joining later, and I'll get everybody started because there's these 3 basic things that we need to do to set up our loom. And then it's kind of practicing. We're just doing the same thing over and over. So if anybody comes in, I can catch them up, or if you can't see anything, we'll catch you back in. So to create our warp, which again, that's the vertical that goes up and down on the loom, you're gonna want to always use a thread that is not springy or stretchy. So the difference between yarn is that usually it has a little bit of give to it, and you can make your loom with basically any thread or yarn that you have. We usually use just recycled fibers here at City Arts, but I just want to say that if you're going to create this again on your own, just make sure that the one that you're using for your warp can't be stretched, doesn't have any like give to it. You could even think of like dental floss that doesn't really move too much. So let's start in the top. I like to start in the top left corner, but you can just start in any corner. So I'm going to start in the top left. So for those who need to see up here, top left, and I'm going to pull my thread through, leaving a tail. And this is going to be a pretty tight loom. If this was a little bit looser, like when we do it for our field trips and we have only 5 slits across here, then we usually tape it down. And if that makes you feel more comfortable, you can tape it here so it doesn't slide. But this is going to be a really nice tight loom on this cardboard here. So it should hold pretty well. Where are we at? I have to go this way. I have to go opposite of what I think. There we are. So once you've got your thread through that top corner, you're going to bring it down and thread it through the other side. And as you can see back here, it's going to just come up the back. So I'm going to slide my thread up so I can come to the second slot. Okay. So I started in the top corner and then slide it down. We're going to come up the back and then slide it through the next one. Come down. Also, what I like to do is keep the thread pretty taut so it keeps it nice and smooth. How is everyone doing with those first threads? And we'll go back and forth. So after you've come from behind, we're going to come down the front. And after this one's the front, we're going to do it behind, and we're just going back and forth and back and forth. And this size of loom makes it so you can, if you wanted to just work with something of this size, I could have started it over here in the middle, or you can do it on the side here, but maybe you just wanted something for a bookmark size, and you could leave your loom at this size if you wanted. So after you start getting more creative with it, you can decide how many threads of the warp you would like. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through all of this light blue thread that I gave you guys in your kit.
And I can't get any volume bigger than this.
And I can't get Apple to turn on.
How are you guys doing? Can anyone not see me and need some help?
I haven't seen anyone ask for help in the comments section. And those of you who did leave your cameras on, I'm watching you weave. It's great.
And I want to say that if you guys, after we're doing this, I gave you an amount of thread and it was, I took it off of this spool, this skein, and I just gave you guys a ball of thread, but you can use anything that you have at home. We can add to it. I'm not sure how much it will go through today. Also, if you guys really can't find yarn anywhere and you want to keep doing this, then I want to welcome you guys to come into City Arts because we have so much yarn. And I would love to share that with you guys. So if you are thinking, oh, I want to keep going with this, we have a lot of different kinds of textures and colors of yarn. We also have just basics. We have so much. So if that is something that's interesting to you and you would like to just use our yarn, we would be happy to share. Okay, so
I have a question. I'm sorry. Should I cut off the excess?
Oh, I would just leave it for now and then cut it off. What I'm gonna do, also for the sake of time, is now I have this thread here that's not gonna fit to go to the other side. I'm just gonna leave that in the back, and I'm gonna have my loom be, my brain doesn't flip backwards. I'm gonna have my loom be this size. So you can leave the tails, you can trim it if it gets annoying. My tails here are pretty long, so I think I'll trim it for your guys' viewing pleasure. But again, this cardboard loom is really nice and tight here. So we don't need to do a lot of tying or taping on the back. You can just kind of leave things, and as we weave, it'll create a really nice connection, a really strong connection in thread.
And another question that came up, what are some ideas for things that you can make with looms?
Oh, like, let's see, what you can make with your weaving or other types of things you can use as looms.
Like earlier you mentioned a bookmark. That's a great idea. Any other fun ideas that they can use these looms for?
I think what we usually do for these sizes is here, we usually say, we usually use it as a gift for a coaster. That's what we do with our field trips and our camps, because it's usually just about this size here that you can set something on, something hot, like a hot drink. But in general, especially like during art camp, we have more time that we can work on these. We'll get a natural stick. So we'll take a nature walk and we'll get a stick, but you could also use a wooden dowel, or just anything kind of long, and we'll weave it in through the top here. We'll cut the bottom off and tie the bottom, but we would weave it through the top, and then it would be a hanging. So I think in general, if you can think of anything that you use cloth for, so maybe you did a really long weaving, maybe you could make it as a mask. I'm kind of thinking, what are other things that you use that are woven fibers and this size? You can get really creative with it like that. And if you want it to just be something artful that you look at, then you can hang it on a stick or a wooden dowel. You could put beads in there as we go along. You could also, what we've done on our nature walks is get grass and then weave grass in there. And it's also how baskets are made. Baskets are woven with grasses. And let's see, Zoom flips, so we don't need to worry about flipping for us, okay? Yeah, it looks backwards to me, so I'm like going this way, but then I have to go backwards in my brain. So where is everyone now? Have you run out of your light blue thread for your warp? Okay, looks good, Angie. Warp is done. Okay. And again, if anyone's just joining us, I can go back through and help you set this up. Because once we get going, you guys, I think will just kind of take off without me. Okay, I think most people are about done. So when you're ready, let's go to the next part of threading our needle. And this blue yarn here is what I gave you guys in your kit. If you had any other yarn that you wanted to use from home, feel free to tag that in here. So what I'm gonna do is show you how to do this plain basic technique. And when we run out of yarn, what you can do if you had more that you wanted to use, it can be a different color, it can be the exact same. We'll just keep going right where we left off. And it's a really nice tight woven material. And it should look pretty sleek. So you've got this ball. And what I would do, because this fabric, there's some polyester fibers in here, I can feel it. It kind of wads up and gets a little bit knotted. Not completely, but as you can see, it kind of twists and twirls a little bit. So what I want you to do is go through it and let's just kind of unkink the yarn. So you want to just unwrap it, make sure it's nice and smooth. And you all should have a yarn needle that came in your kit, in your card that was in the bag. I'm going to use this one that's really big. You don't need this one that's so long, but I thought it would be better for the camera. And you can find these at any craft store, and they're called yarn needles or thread needles, and they're plastic. So you can use them for lots of age groups. So we're going to thread the needle. Where are we at? Over here. And to thread it, if you haven't threaded a needle before, hold with one hand, hold the end of the yarn, and you want to push it through the eye of the needle. And what we're going to do, just come through a little bit. If you can tie a knot, this will help us not have to rethread over and over. And what I'm going to do, in case there's anyone with us who doesn't know how to tie a knot, after you have your thread through the needle, we're going to make a loop. So if you could make a loop, and you're going to have the end of the yarn under. So now I've got a circle, you can see, with the end of the yarn there, and I want to bring the end up and around and go through the circle. And then we're just going to create a nice light knot there. So again, what I did was I created a loop. I took the end of the yarn and went behind. So then when I come up and over, you push the end through the hole and you create a knot. So once you've had your needle threaded, we are going to create the weft. So we have warp and weft. I'm going to start in this top right, no, for you it's top left corner again. And what you do with this plain technique, it's an over-under. So you can start either way, over the first warp or under, and then you want to repeat that pattern. So I'm going to start this one. Let's start under. I'm going to go over the next, under the next one, over, under, over, under. If you need help pulling it up, feel free to do that. Sometimes people will use a piece of wood or even a ruler to go underneath and kind of lift. their loom up. This is too big of a ruler, if that helps. But I have noticed that after we've woven on here for a little while, it kind of loosens up. So if you can see there, I started under, and then I went over, under, all the way to the end. And then slide it all the way through. All the way through until you have a little bit of a tail at the end. And then what we're going to do, if you're good at tying knots, we're going to tie the tail to our warp. If you're not good at it, I would say just leave it, because as you continue your weaving, again, it creates those tight junctions in there, and it's going to hold pretty well. Unless you were going to wear it for something that was kind of being used over and over, it might loosen up. But here's my little tail on the end. And I'm going to tie it in a knot around my warp. Just to make sure it doesn't slide on through. So again, if you like to do knots, then do a loop, pull the end through, and tie that yarn to your warp. If that seems too difficult, then that's okay. Just leave a little bit of a tail there and you'll be all right. So now I'm going to tighten just a little bit. And what I want you guys to do, since I'm new to using these looms, I usually use smaller ones. I realized, I found out over time that as I was doing my weaving, I was coming in too tight each time. So once I learned, ooh, I wish I hadn't been doing that, then you can see here, then I got pretty consistent with my weaving. So it's easy to want to try to pull, but if we can, we want to try not to create this kind of like a silhouette hourglass kind of figure here. We don't want it to come in if possible. We want to keep it nice and even. So pull a little bit, but don't start pulling in if you can help it. But if you also like that look, sometimes I've seen somebody's weaving that they hung on the wall and it has a really nice curve. And if that's what you're looking for with your artwork, then, you know, pull it in. But for the most part, we don't want to do that. And some people use combs if they weave a lot. We're going to just use the end of our needle to push our yarn up to the top. And then I'm going to pull it just a little more to even it out. And I've got my first row done. And I'm keeping it flat here so you guys can see it. In general though, I think it's easier to work up in the air because then you can kind of move your weaving around and kind of go in and out. So feel free to do whatever feels comfortable for you guys. I'm going to keep it down here so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so this next part is just the most important thing to know about your weaving, and then you guys are going to be really ready to go, is whatever you started on, whatever you left on, you want to do the opposite for the next row. So this one is under, and the next row I'm going to start over then, because then that creates a tie. If we didn't do it, and you might see, because you might think that like you might think you have done it right, and then you go to pull your yarn all the way through and then it just comes all the way out. That's because you didn't hook it the right one, doing the opposite of what you did the one before, if that makes sense.
So we're pulling all the yarn through except the bit that is still on the loom from the end of the ball.
Yes. So, and I'm sorry, as some of you guys, if you're going ahead, please do. But yeah, what we'll do now that we have this end here is each time we're just going to be pulling our yarn all the way through. And that's why, and I'm not sure if there's a different way to do this, but if you have a big skein of yarn, the only way I know how to do it is by cutting your yarn off. And so then, you know, if it's a big ball, that's not really manageable because you don't want to be pulling that through the loom. You know, that takes so long. So what I know of is taking these small pieces of yarn and going through and then adding to it as we go on, because as you'll see, we'll just keep pulling and pulling and pulling. But I think that the repetition of doing this over and over, it can be kind of relaxing and meditative. So if you enjoy it, then I think you can find different ways to make your weaving happen. So I'm ready to do my second row here. I've gone under on the last one, so I'm going to go over. And then we're going under, over, under, over. And sometimes if you need to say that out loud to yourself to keep you in a rhythm, feel free to do that. And you kind of have to pull with the weft to kind of help you come through. So as you can see, if I have a huge ball here, this takes a little while to pull through. But also you'll learn this too, that you'll want to keep it really smooth, because if you get a little knot in there, you've got to try to fix it, and it gets hard when it's in your loom. So here, what I'm going to do, I'm tempted to pull it tighter, but what I want to try is to not bring it so far in like I usually do. So I'm going to stop there. And then I'm going to comb it up. And what I like to tell students, the goal, especially if this is your first one ever, is let's not have any spaces in there. So if you can use the end of your needle to touch the other of your weft, which is again the horizontal lines going back and forth, then you're going to have a nice tight weaving. So I ended on an over. So my next one is going under. I'm trying to think if there's other things you can use with your little creations. If anybody has any ideas that you can put in the chat that you were thinking, maybe this would be something fun to use it for, then you could share that with us. And again, I like this yarn because it's really pretty and it's very unique, but I have to kind of keep pulling on it to make sure I don't create a knot. And if you do create a knot, no worries. You just slow down and undo it. Okay, and then you just keep going. You repeat that over and over until you've run out of your thread. It's really interesting when we do this for our field trips, and we'll have students who are really frustrated with it at first, but once they kind of get into it, then they are like, no, I can't stop until I've finished it. But I think it's one of those things, you know, there's different types of art forms for different people. I'm a potter. I like to get muddy. For a lot of people, they don't want to do that. We have glass blowing classes here at City Arts. To me, that sounds really scary. It sounds really hot because I'm more of like a wet clay type of person. There's so many different art forms that you can do to spend your time. And I think it's fun when it can be something that is functional, which is why I like to do things out of pottery, because then I can use the pottery to eat with or drink with. Weaving obviously is I think it's the oldest art form in the world. We've been using it for so long because it's necessary. I usually always have to tell myself, okay, what was the last one? It was an over. It's okay, so now I need to go under. And then after a while, I get in a good rhythm. And then let's see, someone says, when the thread is done, do I just tie on another thread? Let's see, I can show you an example on my other loom over here. So you can either, what I usually do with young students is I tie on the thread because their loom is pretty, or their weaving is pretty loose, and I'm worried that it's gonna kind of come undone. But if your weaving is pretty tight, then what you can do is put on another piece of thread and do the same thing, but just keep going. And I'll show you what I mean by that after I pull this guy through. Okay, so here on my other one, here's the end, and I haven't tied it. So say you just ran out of your thread and you'd like to do some more. I wish I had another color in here for you guys. But I've just got the same blue. And since weaving is that nice, tight in and out, you actually don't have to tie it if you don't wish. So this one ended on an over. I'm just gonna go in and just start and keep going. And if I had a different color of thread, then I think this would be more visible for you to see the difference that you can just, so if I stopped here in the middle, if this yarn here actually ended here, it would be the same thing. Just start with your next piece and keep going. And keep a little tail. And what I've seen, I haven't done this, but what I've seen is then people will, I mean, these are weavers who are more experienced and very good at this. They will tuck the end in to this loop with the needle. But what I would do is for our basic weaving here, just add it on, keep rolling. And I think probably I would tie these two together and then cut that knot really close there. So then you couldn't see it, or maybe kind of put it at the back. Let's see, how do you change the colors on the weft? Okay, and I think maybe if I was just showing you, that might help. If I had different color of yarn here, I think that would help show you. Here, I ran out of my first thread about here. Then I added some more, and all I did was just keep going. I just came in and kept going. You just don't want to pull the tail all the way out. But as you continue to weave, it just gets nice and tight in there. And I think I had another question up here. Oh, glad the cat is asleep. That's true. When I do this at home, it's like, make sure they're not around you. Okay, and I think I have all the questions. Someone said to do a Satch, an herbal sachet, I think is how you say it. That's such a good idea. Yeah, if you put dried herbs in there, that could be beautiful. Okay, so putting a design or something, that's something I don't have experience with, but I have seen other people do this. And I think it's different techniques. but if now you guys understand the basics, you've got your loom, you've got your warp that's going up and down, and your weft going back and forth. And you could, so maybe if you wanted to put a circle of maybe, let's say, a bright orange circle here in the middle, you could take this blue color. Maybe if I want an orange circle in the middle and then blue on the outside, you could start coming into here, then stop, then go back out, come back in, stop, and you can start to change the shape there. And you could leave room to then put in your orange. So then you would come back in and put the orange and go back and forth and back and forth. I like the different textures that people will put in of fabrics. And that's something, because I think that's something I don't see normally. So I feel like that's a nice artistic type of look. And I think if you follow that concept of over under, or there's different types of like how many you might go through. I think I've seen people do 2 over, 2 under, 2 over, 2 under, and then that creates different types. But you are welcome to explore that. I think if you got this kind of grounded baseline, then you can see, okay, I think this is doable. Because I think this art form is just, it's beautiful. It definitely takes lots and lots of practice. As you can see, mine coming in, I would say is, I'm a beginner level. But if this is something you guys love as an art form, then I think that would be great if you guys kept exploring it. Okay. So I'm going to keep going on mine. And does anyone have any questions about this basic beginning part? Is everybody just kind of going? You do 2 over and 2 under, 3 over and 3 under. Oh, wow. And I wonder, I think it's like I learned crocheting when I was younger. And then I learned knitting in college, and it was kind of, I just kind of wanted to keep doing what I knew of crocheting. But it's when you start learning those different knots and those different hooks, you can start creating different designs. And so weaving is a lot like that too. It's kind of hard to hold it down. Okay, I see someone is asking, should they have cut their weft into shorter lengths? She feels like the ball is too much to work with. And if you want to, I would cut it, just go ahead and cut it now. And you'll do what I showed of when you come back in with the new thread, then you can just keep going. Because I do think when I've done this at home, or like someone said about having a cat, you don't really want a huge ball to work with. I think it's easier if you can kind of straighten out your yarn and keep it even. So if you need to cut this down, please do. And again, I was trying to estimate how much yarn you might need. And if you are loving this project and you can't purchase yarn for yourself, or you want to see what we have, please feel free to come into City Arts and just check in at the front desk, and I will let them know that my Big Reed Loom weavers, they can come and look at our yarn selection, and you can take what you need. Yes, you can buy thinner looms. I purchased these on dickblick.com, which is an art supply store. And there was different sizes. I got the second to the largest size, which maybe that might have been a little bit too much if you're a beginner. But they had ones that were smaller like this in width. They were smaller this way. Can you see my hands? They were smaller this way. So you can look. I haven't looked if there's any locally available. I know the yarn and the needles are available at Michael's and Hobby Lobby. But I haven't seen the cardboard looms. But again, you can make those out of maybe not a cereal box. I think that cardboard's too thin, but we usually use boxes and cut them down with a box cutter, and you can do all different kinds of sizes. Oh, someone says they're an art major. Hello. I was an art major too. I was a studio art major at McPherson College.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah. What's your name?
Taverick.
Where are you going to school?
I'm out of school.
Oh, okay. But you love art?
Yes.
Awesome.
I've been to Northeast Magnet.
Oh, that's
Art.
a really good school.
Yeah.
For the arts. It's a good high school for the arts.
Yes.
Okay, so this concludes our recorded portion. Everyone should have their loom set up and their weaving going back and forth. Again, I just want to thank you guys and remind you to check out City Arts classes. You can find us online at wichita.gov/cityarts. And you can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. Ooh, somebody has a question. How do you remove it from the loom? That I would like to be on the recording, please, Sarah. But after we remove the loom, then we'll stop the recording, and then we can also, you can turn on your cameras and show us how you've been doing. If you have any other ideas you would like to share, then we would love to hear them. You can use foam core to make any size loom, easy to cut with a craft knife. That's a really good idea, and I think I will use that next time because I think that would be easier to cut than the utility knife with the cardboard. Okay. So what I'm going to do here to end this, to cut this off of my loom, I'm going to cut, and actually what I would like to do, since I have these edges here that are kind of trailing, I am going to tie them to my warp because that is making me nervous that they might kind of slide off. I feel like there's too much here. So if you want to go ahead and try to do that, please do. I think that it will be okay without, but let's just give it, because I think it will be okay because all of this is nice and tight. I've seen though, very beginners, if you've got spaces in here, which is totally okay, because if this is your very first time or your first couple of times, then it takes a while to get used to a nice rhythm. But if you've got some spaces in here, once we untie this, then it might all kind of loosen up and come undone. So if you are able, tie a knot on your end there. And again, that's a loop, taking the end through that loop and then pulling it. Someone said, I've made a loom on a picture frame before. It makes it easier to pass the yarn through, but your strings don't stay put. You have to self-manage them. And I saw that too when I've looked at videos of people not using these slits to hold their yarn. And that's interesting to me. And I don't know if maybe they pull their warp really, really tight to keep it from sliding, but I've seen that on a frame. Okay, so I have tied these two ends here to my warp, and I'm going to trim down my little tails, but be careful that you don't cut your knot. So you can trim it down pretty close. Just be sure to not cut the knot. It might be kind of hard to see because of the different textures in this thread. But also I feel like this thread is pretty forgiving too, since it's got this nice texture. Oh, someone said if you want to make a more permanent one out of picture frames, you could use some small nails to hold them. That's a good idea. I really like these types of crafts that are thousands and thousands of years old. It's similar to pottery too, because what you can do is you can create out of almost anything. So this is a more, kind of formal way. We had the loom already cut for us, but you can find so many different things for your frame to keep it nice and taut. You can make, and you've probably seen huge looms that take up the size of a room to create rugs. Yeah, so for the most part, these, really old crafts are really nice because it's a pastime that people do over thousands of years. All right, so let's say that we're done doing all of the yarn work that we want to across here. So to end it, you'll want to be able to tie knots. So if you can't tie knots or you're not good at it yet, have somebody help you. I'll go back through and say how to tie if you need that. But what you're going to do is take a pair of scissors and how can I get more in the middle? We're going to snip right through the middle. So snip, snip. And this is going to release our loom. Okay. And then you'll flip it over, and this is where the knot tying comes in. So if you wanted to put a dowel through the top, you could do that up here and then just have the bottom tied. Since I don't have something for that, we're going to tie both of them. And this is how you would tie off most any basic loom weaving. It can get more complicated than that, but sometimes knots are complicated enough. So what you're going to do, and I think it's going to be easiest if you just do 2 at a time, take off 2 of your warp or your thread, and you're going to tie a knot. And this will keep it from unraveling. So this part takes a little while, but you want to be able to keep that beautiful work that you just did. So I'm going to tie a knot, and let me go back through that. I'm going to double knot it since that's the end. I'm going to go back through if you're not comfortable with knots. So I'm going to create a loop. I'm going to have this one go under, this one go over. So whichever one goes over, you're going to want to pull the end through. So it's creating a loop, but also a knot. That's how we create the knot. And then to keep it nice and tight together, we're going to use the next one that comes off. We're going to tie it to that one that's already been tied before. Or if you want it to be more simple, you could just take off the next 2, tie those 2 together, tie those 2 together, and just keep going like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to double check myself here. And I'm going to take the one from before and tie it twice. So you're just tying up those ends. So I'm leaving one here from before, taking off the next one, and let's tie that one together. Oh, thank you, Brenda. I hope you had fun. And does anyone need more of a demonstration on the knot tying? I don't want that to be a barrier if I can help it. And as you can imagine, you're just going to do that over and over and over.